can't have an ego in jiu-jitsu, which is, I would say, mostly true, but everyone has an ego no matter what. You have to really like put it on a leash, because when a girl half your size starts to beat you up, and you really know, oh crap, I have to do something about this.
Welcome to the 7 Levels of Performance podcast, the show that goes behind the scenes of some of the world's best athletes and performers to give you the exclusive take on what they do to be at their best and how you can implement those things in your life to be at your best today. I'm your host, Chris Morgan, coach, performance expert, and unranked in the world's most interesting man competition. Arya, how you doing, man?
Hey, buddy. How you doing, Chris?
Good, thanks. Welcome to the show, man. Glad to have you.
Thank you very much for having me, man. It's a big honor to be with you, man. You gave me a lot of help so far, so how could I refuse?
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to have you because not only are you an exciting Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitor, you're a really cool dude, and you got some good stuff going on. So for folks who don't know, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from with your background, where you're at right now?
I'm a London-based athlete. I was born and raised in London. I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and Judo black belt also. I compete at pretty high level. I've placed second in the world. I've won the European Milkies at black belt, second at Gi, a black belt. I've won a bunch of stuff. It's just, doesn't really matter. But I'm in my new gym. I can probably turn it around at the end and show you, which is really exciting, guys. So yeah, been training for a long time, super into training. I met you, actually. I met Chris when I was doing my first Polaris fight. He agreed to be my mental coach, and I got another fight coming up this month against a pretty tough dude in Cardiff, Devontae Johnson. So that's gonna be fun. You can watch that UFC fight stream. I know you will, Chris.
Yeah, I love it. So for folks who don't know, I mean, you're basically a lifelong martial artist, but for folks who may not be familiar with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there's, when people think of martial arts, a lot of times they think of stand-up, striking, taekwondo, karate, aikido. Talk us through what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is all about.
Well, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is really about closing the distance on the fight as quickly as possible without taking much damage, taking the fight to the floor, and from there using superior leverage and positioning to beat much bigger guys. I started martial arts when I was 4 years old. I was being bullied in school, and my father was a wrestler, so he tried to enroll me in wrestling. But for you guys in the States or wherever don't know, England or the UK doesn't have a very big wrestling culture. Actually, it's virtually zero. So he put me into the next similar thing, which was judo. I started doing that until I was like 16, 17, a few years break. And then, I was dabbling. I did taekwondo, but I didn't really like it too much. I did Muay Thai, and I started doing MMA. I started fighting semi-pro. And I was on my year abroad in Korea. So I was studying in Korea, and these Japanese MMA guys came down. And they were like really small, man. They were like half my size. And they just completely, I think I was 17, 18, they completely dismantled me using jiu-jitsu. And I said, man, I got to learn this, because at first I thought, And then, so since then I've been, at the beginning, actually, I was doing jiu-jitsu for my MMA, but then I just fell in love with Brazilian jiu-jitsu because it's like such an intelligent martial art and something you can keep doing forever because it's smart, it's not based on, of course, strength and fitness definitely come into play, but it's not solely based on that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's, so it is an intelligent martial art. And I mean, you touched on a lot of really cool things in there. One being that 90% of what altercations, especially on the street, end up going to the ground. It's just like that human instinct to want to clench, grab each other. So if you're not aware of what's going on in the ground, then, you're at a real disadvantage.
It's all like nice to say, you strike, you get back, you get into your stance and strike, but in a real altercation, the guy maybe throws one strike and you start clinching and it gets real ugly. But yeah, as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, that's exactly what you're expecting. It's what we account for. And another thing that I like about jiu-jitsu, which is really good, is we can practice everything 100%. Like, in striking or whatever, you can't always practice 100% because you get injuries, brain damage, it's not nice to kick your friend in the face. But in jiu-jitsu, because we have the tap, you can go 100%. Like, oh, you got my arm, you killed me, I'm getting you right back, So it's really nice like that. So you can go 100%, which means that you can be completely confident in what you're doing actually works because you're doing it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's there are risk of slight injuries, but typically nothing compared to striking, no brain damage or, breaking your own, your hand or wrist.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's a really unique characteristic. And so, I'm sure, you've got your gym now and you're promoting it, but, I always tell people, especially women, this is the martial art you want to learn for self-defense.
Exactly. And one thing we focus on here as well is, even though it's probably the most boring aspect, but self-defense is the most important. So our fundamental classes are all about the old school self-defense stuff. So let me just give you a quick, you can see the mat space if you can.
Yes. And for folks watching, and they might be in London or they're London based, where are you within the city? How can they find you?
We're based in West London. The closest station is North Acton on the Central Line. But if you just go to www.purejujitsu.com, or you'll find us real easy.
I like it. Pure Jiu-Jitsu. No substitute, no waste. Cool, man. Okay, so you're doing jiu-jitsu. You were doing judo for a while, and then you got dismantled by these guys, pint-sized guys. I got to learn this martial art. This was around 17 years old. So you fell in love with Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Where are you at today? Who do you typically train with, and what's your target size for competition?
Well, typically I train with my students and go to open mats. I was training a lot at Hodges Academy, but since I've opened my own place. But actually, we got a really good bunch of guys, no-gi. So we all get together and stuff, and they've been helping me out a lot because, especially the heel game and the no-gi game. So there's about 15 of us. We train really hard, really good bunch of footlock guys, and some of them fighting pull up. So as well. But yeah,
that's great. So you mentioned a name that amongst jiu-jitsu folks is really well known, but maybe outside the world isn't, and that's Roger Gracie. So for folks who may not know, who is Roger, and why is it significant to be able to train with him?
Well, actually, I got my black belt from a guy called Legato, but Roger accepted me as a student after. But Roger Gracie is, man. First of all, he's a cool dude. He doesn't get involved in any politics or anything. He's the best ever jiu-jitsu fighter in history ever. He, if you look at him, he just looks like a really nice guy. You can even say he looks nerdy. But, rolling with him is it's like drowning really slowly and in a very painful way. So it's not nice. But, rolling with those guys is always, but when you spar with other guys, you just feel it's like a different level. So, I was very lucky to have him. So he's the best jiu-jitsu fighter. He dabbled in MMA a lot. I think he did win the ONE FC championships.
Mm-hmm.
If he went to the ground, it's over straight away.
Yeah. It's hard to communicate to people outside of jiu-jitsu what drowning slowly feels like.
Yeah. It's like, I think, Chris, if you think about the quote, I think it was one of the Machados said, That makes sense a lot. It's like the ground fighting. The ground is like an ocean. I'm a shark, and most people don't even know how to swim.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I love that analogy. And once people are on their back and flailing, and you mount them, and they want to give up their back, and then before you know it, they're getting choked. It's just this crazy sequence of events that you start to learn. Oh no, my instincts are wrong.
Exactly. Like I always say, maybe you don't know if you're striking, maybe you don't know how to throw a correct punch, but everyone knows how to swing a fist. But you don't, it's not the same on the ground. You can't get someone off you instinctively. You have to learn. Every time I do like an introduction class, I'm always like saying, Jiu-Jitsu for me is a mix of art and physics, which why I think it's so effective, because it is all just physics.
Yeah, exactly. And your instincts aren't trained for that kind of mechanical, physical approach. So it's something you have to kind of unlearn. You have to unlearn and then relearn. So that's powerful.
It is. And it really does beat you down because they say you can't have an ego in jiu-jitsu, which is, I would say, mostly true, but everyone has an ego no matter what. You're never going to completely get rid of the ego, but you have to really like put it on a leash, because when a girl half your size starts to beat you up, and you really know, oh crap, I have to do something about this. I can't be such a douche.
Yeah, and let's touch on that, because I think that's a really interesting intersection into the mental game, which is constantly having your ego tamed, right?
Right.
Martial arts, but especially jiu-jitsu, is this really interesting connection of the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and it all kind of comes together on the mat. So, what's your experience like over the course of your training jiu-jitsu, and how is that, what have you learned about training the ego and training the mental game, and how do you kind of articulate that now?
Well, first, let me just start off by saying a little bit about jiu-jitsu, why I think it's really cool. One of the reasons, the mental, because we're talking about mental and spiritual.
Yeah.
Jiu-jitsu is still like a traditional martial art. I mean, if it's not a traditional martial art, it still holds all the values of a traditional martial art, like coming from Japan and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always constant. It's constantly evolving and it's super effective, but it still holds the traditional values, which a lot of modern styles and more effective styles don't, which is why it's so attractive. So in terms of ego and stuff, man, honestly, you get beaten down some days really bad to the point that you just want to, it's like you go home, you're like, I don't know why my professors, when I was brown belt, honestly, the guy tapped me out 7 times in 6 minutes. And I was like, it was before I was going to the world. And I was brown belt. I was just thinking to myself, what am I doing? What, I was in the corner, rocking in the corner, having my imaginary cigarette. But yeah, once you get past that stage, I mean, it's always going to be there. Mm. But if you learn to beat down, it makes you mentally passive. Like, for example, if you're going to train, you're going to get that. It's not. So you have to be like, oh, it's okay. It's a part of growing. So I think it's really good. It teaches you that inside of the mats and outside of life as well, because you can't always win. You learn really quickly. There's always going to be a bigger fish. You might be like the toughest guy in your gym, but you go somewhere else, someone else is going to whip your butt. You can't be like a bad guy to them. You just got to accept it. Okay, you train, you get better. If you accept it, then you can get better, and then it becomes a circle. Then you become better than the guy, and he has to accept. But if you don't, just gotta,
Yeah, I like that. It's, what you're really talking about is depersonalizing so when people get tapped, for folks who don't know, that's basically your sign of surrender, that the other guy has got the upper hand and has put you in a position that if he or she were to continue, you would be in trouble. Your arm could break. You could go to sleep with a choke. So when you're in that position and when you said you're a brown belt, that's one step away from a black belt. That's what, 7 to 9 years for training for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So you're not new to this.
Exactly. And exactly what you're saying. I was doing really well in like international and domestic competitions, and this guy just did that to me. I was like, what's going on? Like, I want to quit.
Yeah. And before a big competition, that's a moment of doubt. So you were able to kind of turn it and train yourself to not take it as a personal, a sign of something personal. It's learning.
Yeah, exactly. It's learning. And the best way to put it was, honestly, with this particular guy I used to train with him like 3 hours every morning. And honestly, for about 2 or 3 years, I used to get whooped bad, like wrecked. And then like towards the end of the training, it turned around. I started beating him, So it just shows if you stick with something, and it's something that teaches you in life, just stick with it, no matter how much it beats you down. You get through it. Like there's a really, something I think is cheesy, but I really like this Japanese quote. It says, "Fall down 7 times, stand up 8." So I think jiu-jitsu that really reflects in jiu-jitsu if you want to get good anyway.
Yeah. So you're learning persistence, and I mean it's persistence by quote, or like, I had one obstacle, I overcame it, now life is good for a long time. It's like this stuff keeps coming up. And for years, like you said, it could feel like you're not really doing well because you're getting tapped so much. Or the other case of you're doing really well, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, it feels like you're not good anymore.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, I always like to think that other sports, we can learn from each other. And one of the things that I think jiu-jitsu, martial arts or jiu-jitsu offers from a, developmental perspective to other sports is that idea of immediate feedback, constant learning, taming the ego. When you think to your days in competition and training, what else have you learned?
Competition? Well, man, I get super nervous before I compete, which is why I approached you. But, even though I would do really well, I think you're put in a complete position of stress. And when you're talking about other sports, such as team sports, whatever it could be, you can always rely on someone else or blame someone else. But when it's a martial art, when it's just 2 people, man, it's the purest form. It's just you two. You have nothing to say. You can't lie. You can't make up fake excuses. You can't, you just know it's you two. So I think that kind of feeling when you go to competition, especially if it's like big, man, just walking out, like everyone's watching. After you do like normal things again, let's say, I don't know, you have bills to pay or something, just, whatever, I'll figure it out. Or, it just makes everything else, so it dampens everything else, because fighting is so real. Like, I'm not even fighting martial arts or like that kind of thing. It's such an instinctive thing. Bills and stresses from work, they're not very, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but we make it bigger than it really should be, and it really does make a big impact on our life. So that's why you find a lot of guys come from different backgrounds. Like you could find like a doctor, a CEO, or a builder, on the same mats, and they all come stressed and they always leave really happy, which is one of the really attractive things about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like free therapy rolled into your gym membership.
Yeah.
Well, you said something interesting, and you didn't say this word, but that's what I thought of, which is, the idea of pure accountability. It's just you. In a team sport, you can kind of float with the team, or the team can kind of, it might hamper you a little bit, but when it's the one-on-one aspect, you are purely accountable for your success.
Yeah, exactly. I remember I was complaining about one of my old coaches. didn't come to see me fight quite often. He said, anytime one of my students fights, I always go because I know how it goes. He was like, man, I'm not going to do the fighting. It's you. You're going to fight up. And I thought about it. I was like, this guy's right. This guy's right. He's not the one doing the fighting. It's all me. So even if he's there or not, to offer some kind of support, at the end of the day, I'm the one that's going to be fighting.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that's, I think a lot of times people maybe don't understand the level of nerves that can come in because of that level of accountability. And when you're doing it at a professional level, it's even more because there's money at stake. This is your livelihood, all that. So talk us through, how you've been able to cope and turn those nerves into something that worked for you.
Well, it's difficult. You just got to kind of see it for what it is, To be honest, before I started speaking to you, I used to just rely on my ability, my technique to get me through it because I train with some really high-level guys and I study a lot. Like Jiu-Jitsu is I come in from a very smart angle. Like it's all about thinking. It's not about brute strength. But it was really funny because I've been forced, thanks to your techniques and stuff, to talk to myself and really find out. There's a lot going on in the subconscious, your inner self and stuff. It really forces you to, it's easy to live day by day and just go, live a comfortable life. But when you're in like a stress position, you're forced to deal with things, face on. There's no running away. You can't run away from yourself. You can't run away from your inner critique or whatever. You have to face it. One of the things that was really nice that what you did with me was instead of kind of shut out that voice, it was to make it your own fan. So I don't know if you guys will see me fight or like in the last part, the next one. We had like a symbol to bring out your inner self, to like help you fight. It's a really good technique.
Yeah. So the idea of shutting down the inner critic, kind of that voice that's criticizing you or making you feel worried, that's a predominant school of thinking. So what was it about, accepting and kind of changing the critic voice to something more like a fan that really helped you?
Well, I found with, as you said, it was a predominant way of thinking. Let's call it the dark passenger. Your life is a car. You're driving through life in a car, and you always have that passenger. It's always. So by trying to shut it out, I found that it would always kind of come back. But if I tried to deal with it from a different angle, making it my friend somehow through the techniques that we discussed and you helped me with, I managed to like get some kind of like a second win or like some kind of inner strength to help me as well, which is nice because you can't run away all the time. Things are always going to be there. You can't shut it out. Like if your house is getting flooded, you can't just close the door. Sooner or later, it's going to come through the little gaps. And that's what I think was very different because, I read a lot of books and I spoke to a lot of people when I was fighting bigger tournaments. People were happy to help, such as yourself. But I think what you did with me was the biggest help. And it really did change my perspective of everything. So, if you guys haven't worked with Chris, I really recommend it.
And I promise everyone I didn't tell him to say that. But it's just the idea of instead of having to, what you resist persists. So instead of having to resist it, working with that energy and you using it in your favor can help shift that balance of nerves into something that seems really, really difficult to manage to something that's more manageable.
Yeah.
So stepping up to the mats, what else do you like to do to kind of get yourself sharp and feeling good before a competition?
In terms of mental techniques or just overall?
Yeah, anything. If you were to advise, folks in other sports or coming up who want to be, more accountable for their performance, how would you advise them?
Make it like, don't make it something special. Make it like everything else. So do the same warm-up you do when you train. I have kind of like a ritual, like you said, I do like a little hand movements to bring things out. yeah, I always visit my inner self, before I go to that place and bring out my inner fan. But just keeping everything consistent, and at the end, thinking of it for what it is instead of what your mind is making. Like, for example, I remember when I was in university, I used to really freak out about exams. And one of the, what they call invigilators, the people that just check you're not cheating or just whatever. It was a really nice, sweet lady. She was like, I was freaking out because it was my finals and for college, sorry, you guys go college. And then she's like, worst case, whatever happens, at the end of the day, even if you fail, you can do it next year. I thought, yeah, why am I making it such a big thing? And I feel like in modern day society, because, everything's so comfortable for us, we make like mountains out of molehills, Like back in the day, I'm guessing surviving was so hard, but now it's just about, oh my God, work's not going so well, what's going to happen? Which is in reality quite minor. That's what is so nice about martial arts, especially jiu-jitsu, where you're forced to go into that like fighting state, like the pure instinct state. And when you come out, you're just like, everything else is okay. I'll deal with it as it comes. It's not going to beat me down,
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it's like being able to engage that survival part of our mind that we have from our evolutionary history helps you keep perspective, because you're in those situations where you have to survive. You know what a potential life and death situation is, although on a very safe scale. And it's like by doing that, it's like the other stuff in life is like, it wasn't fun. I didn't want it to happen, but okay. There's bigger things in life.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that helps you keep perspective. And then as far as helping other people, it's just another day. Don't treat it as something super special. Stay consistent with your preparation. Do what you do before any other day. Yeah,
exactly. So it just doesn't seem anything out of the ordinary, warm up the same way, do the same. I know people do different things, like little things before they enter the match or before they fight. And just another way, a more extreme way, like for example, if you do jiu-jitsu, it dampens everything out. But a really extreme way, which I'm sure many of your listeners who haven't trained can relate to, is, for example, if you've ever been really sick and then you feel terrible, like really sick, and you just literally don't care about anything else. It's kind of similar to that without the horrible crack. It's kind of, you feel good, but it has the same effect, which is really nice.
Yeah. It does have that same effect, and that's powerful. So I'm curious, what's the dream for you when you don't have any restrictions on yourself and there's nothing you have to worry about? What does that dream look like?
Well, man, I want to be competing as long as I can. So I reckon I'll be about 7-8 years at the highest level. And I've opened the gym, so it started, last week, officially opened. I mean, I just want to keep growing. Jiu-jitsu really helps people's lives. As a competitor, I want to keep doing really well in tournaments, but in terms of the dream, man, how much better can you get? I get my own gym, people come here, like I can see how it changes their life. I feel good. It's a very selfish thing, because when you help someone, you feel good as well. So it's quite selfish. I just want to be able to be on the mat. I'm a simple guy. I don't really need very many material things. I'm happy, I'm really happy right now. And I think we need to struggle to keep being happy. We need humans are designed in a way that, I've trained a lot of affluent guys that, they have everything, but in fact, they're not happy with anything, no matter what you get. But guys that have very small things, or they have to work for something, feel really happy, Jiu-Jitsu will always give you that. So I'm really happy. The dream, I'm living my dream, just to help as many people as I can for selfish reasons, and just keep training high level. It's relaxed. After university, after college, I worked in an office for about 2 weeks, and it really wasn't for me. You know, my parents were like, come on, this is life. But not you have to accept it, but, you know, it's a reality of life. For me, that was a really hard thing to accept. So I'm very lucky. Like, up to this point, I haven't been very lucky monetary-wise, but most competitors aren't. Rely on sponsorship stuff. But, you know, look at me now, even though I just opened the gym, you know, I'm not taking away shit, but I'm super happy with what I'm doing. You know, I feel happy every day I wake up. I'm not upset about waking up at 5 a.m., coming to the gym at 6:30. Every time I see someone, I feel good. This is a dream, man. Like, I don't want to get sucked into that corporate world, to be honest. I mean, nothing bad about it. It brings in a lot of money, but it wasn't for me. So I'm pretty much started living my dream as of last week, you know, and it wasn't easy.
There's a lot in that. And that's, I think there's a level of, you know, profound, real profound thinking you laid on everyone, which is you're living your dream. You're sacrificing and working for that. It's not easy, but that struggle is what's producing the state of feeling happy.
Yeah.
And there's also something about a mission, right? Like helping other people, you're changing lives. I mean, you talked very little. I mean, it was like, yeah, I'm a competitor. I want to be high level, but then it was all about, you know, this thing of a mission and being able to live that every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, for example, like in terms of competition stuff, I still have that fire to do so well. When I was a little bit younger, that's all I thought about. But if you really look at it at the end of the day, it's just win a bunch of medals. People forget, really. You know, I mean, they don't forget, but I know a bunch of people that used to be the man like 10 years ago. They walked through the modern, you know, jiu-jitsu community. No one really recognized. And at the end of the day, what does it really give you? It's, you know, I do it because I want to test myself. I always want to be the best at whatever I do. And I think, you know, fighting or martial arts was always really important for me because I didn't want to feel weak, especially after I was bullied. But there's more to that, you know. I mean, when you help someone else get better, you know, it's like you pass on good energy, they pass it on to someone else. And London is not the most friendliest of places. For example, when I was in California, people say hi to each other on the street in Southern California. Over here, if you did that, people would be like, why are you talking to me? But, you know, like sometimes someone will do something or smile, you say something nice, and that for the rest of the day, and you can pass that on to someone else. And it's just a nice, man, if you asked me 5 years ago, competition's everything, I just want to smash this guy, blah, 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 blah. Which is still the case, man. Don't get me wrong, I still want to smash that, but there's
yeah, it grows. It's like this evolution, and you started at this foundation of, well, first of all, you didn't want to get beat up as a kid, so you took martial arts to not get bullied. That worked. Then you're like, oh, this is great. I love this. I can compete and smash other people now in a fun and safe way. And that was the dominant thing for a while. And then it's, you know, it's this next stage of helping other people and passing along your knowledge, transforming their lives, and being this force, you know, out there in the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually a really dangerous thing because you hold a lot of power. You know, everyone's normal. Like, you hold a lot of power as an instructor. People really look up to you, even if they're older or successful. They look up to you as a source of guidance. So you can use that in a really bad way. So, like, I treat my students, as long as they're being respectful, I treat them like I don't think I'm higher than them or anything.
Yeah.
Because I just don't want them to make wrong choices. Because I idolized some wrong people growing up, and you know, I told myself I would never be like that. I just treat everyone normally, no matter what. If it's a poor guy, super rich guy, everything, I'm gonna treat everyone the same.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and it's a great way to kind of wrap ourselves up today. So, give everyone a quick view of the gym. Arya's in London, Pure Jiu-Jitsu. Best kid. There it is. Yes.
Yeah. So this is the gym. Sorry. So it's shop front. This is the mat area. If I don't lose connection, so we have the female changing rooms in here, male changing rooms here, and This is the marketing manager and receptionist.
Hey.
And this is the man. So, yeah.
Nice and clean. I like it.
Pretty much. Yeah, man, it's awesome.
All right. Well, it's great talking with you, man. Yeah.
Man.
I look forward to seeing you compete later in the month in Cardiff, right? And
yeah, it's in Newport. Yeah.
Okay, so we can catch it on UFC, and yeah, okay, I'll put that link when I post. But awesome stuff, man. It's always a privilege talking with you, and keep up the great mission work, and we'll follow you. All right. Hang on a second.
Take care, bro. Thank you.